The Western, one of the most popular film genres ever. Cowboys, outlaws, and Native Americans.
Ladies and gentlemen, permit me to introduce to you a Congress of the Rough Riders of the World.
It was in the pioneer days of filmmaking when Native Americans first appeared in Thomas Edison's documentation of Buffalo Bill's Wild West show. They were seen as noble savages, wearing feathers and animal skins and war paint. Simply Indians, they were going into battle with the cowboys. They were the bad guys, stereotypes that entered into nearly every Western film before 1970 and ingrained in the public imagination for decades.
We used to go every Friday night, we would go to the movies in Fort Covington, which is a town next to us that had a theater.
It was in New York State when Beverly was 5 years old. She saw a Western and expected nothing good would come from the Indians.
And so when the movie would start, as soon as the Indians would come attacking and screaming and yelling, I would crawl under the seat and plug my ears so I couldn't hear the Indian.
In film, Native Americans responding only to violence, terrifying, attacking white people with little reason.
And when it was over, when the scene was over, my dad would lean over and tap me on the head or my bottom to let me know it was okay to get back in my seat.
But it wasn't long before Beverly realized something earth-shattering. Those Native Americans she saw on the screen, attacking white farmers and pioneers, the ones she saw as villains, well, she had more in common with them than she would have ever known.
I didn't know that I was Indian. I was always for the cowboys.
Her family descended from the Mohawk tribe, but for years they made every effort to deny their language and their traditions. They suppressed their Native American heritage in favor of the Catholic Church.
We were all very strong Catholics, and we celebrated all the feast days of Catholicism, going to Mass every Sunday, making our first communion and confirmation. There wasn't really anything that was native.
Except for one, making traditional hash.
I was 15 or 16 years old, and I was at a party across the street, and there was a man there that did not look Indian himself, but he was. And in fact, he looked like Frank Sinatra, had blue eyes and light hair. And he was talking to my mother in Mohawk. And when I came and sat down next to my mother, the man said to my mother, "Who is this girl?" And my mother said, "This is my daughter. She's the baby of the family." And he looked at me, and I had a pretty dress on, party dress on. And he looked at me and he said, "When you leave this reservation, do not tell anyone that you're Native American."
To belong, to be accepted, meant erasing part of who they were. It was a lesson passed down not out of shame, but out of necessity, a survival strategy in a country that sought to erase them.
When the white man came, they saw this rich country, and they wanted it. They wanted it. And their goal was to get rid of the Native Americans. Whatever it took to get rid of them, to assimilate them. And I think perhaps they're on that road to succeeding.
Assimilation wasn't just encouraged, it was enforced. a slow, deliberate annihilation of identity, language, and culture. And yet, in the quiet spaces of family and memory, Indigenous people are still clinging to the last bits of their culture. Culture that the media fails to show. Colton Ashley is the Tribal Media Coordinator for KSUT Public Radio.
I would say it's a little bit of a self-licking ice cream cone. I think that a lot of stereotypes or a lot of generalities exist in the culture at large in society, and so then that informs the media, which then reinforces stereotypes, and it's a hard cycle to break.
A cycle of misrepresentation and stereotypes that have seeped from Hollywood into the news.
I mean, the short answer is that mainstream media does not know how to report an Indian country, doesn't know how to handle Indigenous stories, and I think most importantly, doesn't understand how to fit our stories into the narratives that they're particularly interested in. In your journalism program, I'm assuming, just like when I went through journalism school, they're probably telling you that like the thing that journalists do is they work for democracy. Indigenous journalists are not trying to work for democracy, right? Indigenous journalists are working towards self-determination. We're working towards sovereignty. The United States does, and the American democracy, does not work for us in the same way because we are independent nations. We have been independent nations, and our systems of government, our ways of thought, our reasons for being descend from a different tradition than the American tradition, right? So when you're talking about like, we're the pillars of democracy, it's like, great. The thing that tried to kill us for literally 500 years.
Native Americans are 500% more likely to experience alcohol-induced deaths.
A number of people are facing charges after a drug bust on the Pine Ridge Reservation.
We look for something else. We look for alcohol, we look for drugs, some way to get away from that reality.
4 liquor stores have for decades
Navigating this
sold
complicated
over 4 million
dynamic has led
cans of
some
beer
journalists
a
to believe that
year, almost
Indigenous
entirely
people should be the
members
only
of
ones
Boulder
telling their
Sioux
stories.
tribe on the Pine Ridge Indian Reservation.
I think it's very important for, Indigenous communities and people to be represented as, who they truly are, which is this culture that, I'm part of the Navajo Nation. And a lot of times there's strength, there's courage, there's discipline, and there's a lot of things that, you're taught when you're being raised to have respect. So a lot of these images, when I came back, I really wanted to portray that side of the Indigenous community because there was a lack of it when it came to the content that I was seeing that was out there. It was more portrayed as like people who were in poverty, even like, substance abuse problems, or those narratives that was being captured, I thought wasn't really truly authentic.
Even if the media has every intention to cover authentic Indigenous stories, progress has been little to none, leaving many to wonder what is the future for Indigenous journalism.
I have zero hope in settler society.
I don't know if you mentioned the New York Times, but I'll mention the New York Times. They're a great example of a publication that repeatedly, over and over and over again, will make these really obvious errors and cultural competency issues and, they will hear from Native journalists and be like, this is what you've done wrong. Can you retract this article or apologize or whatever? And they won't do it. And then they'll just kind of double down and do it again pretty soon. So I can totally see how from one perspective, it's well, you know what, we're going to spend our energy elsewhere in a way that will actually uplift the stories that we want to tell.
Calling out their mistakes is one thing, but convincing major publications like the New York Times to fix the way they approach Indigenous stories is daunting. It's a task that requires both non-Indigenous and Indigenous journalists to work together.
Traditional media needs to understand that they need to be hiring Indigenous journalists, and they need to be putting money and resources towards that coverage. And so like whatever part I have to play in like supporting them to do that is like what I want to be able to do, including like cultural competency and like pushing editors to do a better job.
Lived experience is one thing, but non-Native reporters can still use their voices to advocate for Indigenous issues and tell the stories that help the whole community.
So in terms of who should be telling stories, I don't think that it necessarily needs to be limited to just Indigenous folks, especially because there is a lot that can be exchanged culturally by having someone who isn't Indigenous tell a story that involves indigeneity.
There is that historical trauma. There's still a lot of healing that needs to be done, and I think that's where traditional media lacks that knowledge of understanding. Like some tribes just there's that history that it takes a while to develop those relationships and get over and kind of heal from that. How we're going to do that, it's really just, I guess, continuing, having Indigenous storytellers or journalists go in and keep crafting those stories, so that way it could be a little bit more understood.
Again, part of that's just forward thinking. Part of that is we are fortunate enough to have, resources at our disposal for that. And not all community radio, not all public radio have that. And so we sort of pride ourselves on being forward-thinking and being willing to take risks so others don't have to. So if we fail, first, we don't fail big. And it's not as if we fail and then everything has to go away. It's that we learn, grow, and then we can teach it to others and help figure out how a community can evolve or to re-establish or rewrite the relationship with media.
So when journalists work to replace those stereotypes with accurate, positive, and uplifting stories, young Indigenous people can start to move past self-suppression.
We seem, in movies, we always seem to be second class, and so that's the way we feel. And we're not. We are good, strong, educated, well-spoken natives, and I just wish they would know that about themselves.
For centuries, Native Americans were told to disappear, to blend in, to forget. But silence was never the end of the story. Indigenous voices must be heard, not as subjects, but as reporters, editors, decision-makers, and examples of success, shaping the narrative from within to create better representation for younger generations.
It's important for that young child to know that she is an Indian. No matter what tribe she belongs to, she is an Indian. And being an Indian, to me, gives you an incredible inner spirit, an incredible dream maker, a dream maker, that she can aspire. If she can be out there dancing on her own and feeling the drums, boom, boom, it's like your heart beating when you hear those drums. She can aspire to spread her wings and do whatever she wants to be successful. And she will. And she will.